share the agenda. We come together because we are angry. We're part of the 99% not being heard. Our demands are simple. Stop the cuts. We reject outright the ongoing attack on public sector and force dangerous privatization schemes. Expand services for all. We demand that services be increased to the standards we deserve. No barriers to cops and corporations. We demand that corporate tax rates be raised and cities' bloated police budgets be reined in. We are organizing in neighborhoods to create a strong network of communities who want to take action against the current system where the power is held by the 1% who hold economic power. We believe in people power and not money power.
People power!
To join the community or issue-based group, please visit TorontoStopTheCuts.com. We are the 99%. We will overcome the 1%.
Thank you, Magdalena. So our next speaker is from OPSU, and her name is Megan, and she is the Senior Campaigns Officer for OPSU, one of the unions that's been supporting Occupy Toronto. So please, big round of applause and big welcome for Megan.
Hello, everybody. Those of you in the crowd who are OPSU members, do you mind putting up your hand?
Yeah!
Show some support. I'm joined.
Maybe because that one behind you is interfering with them.
So I'm joined here today with two members of OPSU, Karen and Joe. Joe and Bob. Karen is a long-time provincial government employee. Joe works in our hospital system, and Bob, where do you work? And Bob is a retiree. So we're very happy to be here today. We're going to talk to you about some of the things that are happening at the provincial level. And guess what? It's pretty bad news. The first thing I want to talk to you about is Dalton McGuinty, our Premier, is looking for advice, is turning to for advice from, of all things, a retired banker. People around the world are protesting corporate greed, are protesting 30 years of pro-business policies that have slashed wages, that have wiped out decent jobs, jobs with dignity, that have destroyed our environment, that have slashed social spending, and the very proponent of those kinds of policies is advising our government.
Down with KPMG and Harry Adams!
You got it. So this guy, Don Drummond, former banker, former chief economist for the TD Bank, he's advising, he's looking at every public service in Ontario, and he's going to make recommendations to our Premier about what programs should be cut, about what programs, what social services should be sold off to the private sector so they can make a profit. And he's going to tell the Premier this should all be done really fast. What do we think of that? So on Thursday, so Don Drummond is going to give his report early in the new year. And on Thursday, Dalton, our Premier, just couldn't wait. So he went and had a meeting with Don Drummond. And Don Drummond said, things are getting really bad. So here's a recommendation that I'm going to make. And Dalton McGuinty turns around and immediately reports it to reporters, to news reporters. He says, Don Drummond says, we've got to limit government spending to a 1% increase in every year.
Full fingers. Let's have a public referendum on Dalton McGuinty. Get him out of here.
Okay. let me just explain that a little bit. A 1% increase, maybe that doesn't sound so bad, but there's something called inflation.
How about MPP's wages?
MPP's wages, another issue, yes.
Let her speak. Let her speak.
Anyway, so a 1% increase for every year until 2018. Here's why it's going to be a really bad thing. Because inflation, every time, it's a cut every time the growth goes over inflation. So inflation in September, the last month we have data for, was 3.4%. So a 1% increase in funding is not an increase. It's in fact a cut anytime the rate of inflation goes over 1%. Plus, the population grows in Ontario by at least 1% every year. So in fact,
Services going down.
in fact, what we're really looking at is a cut in government spending of at least 10% over a 6 or 7 year period. Do you think you have enough public services now? No. Well, it's just going to get worse. If Don McGuinty goes through with these bad ideas of Don Drummond. Here's another thing that's going on. Our members, OPSU members, are being laid off. They're being laid off in the hundreds. So at a time, as we know from yesterday, at a time when our economy in Ontario is shedding thousands of full-time permanent jobs,
Tell us about it.
at a time when that's happening, and you know about it, I don't need to tell you that, the Premier is throwing more people out of work. On top of that, he's cutting all kinds of vacant jobs in government. These are open jobs, nobody's sitting in them, but we have all these college, university graduates, right, graduating with enormous debt loads. Those jobs won't be there for them. So we're looking at, people who've worked for the government for 25 years, and I know everybody likes to say they're all pencil pushers and they make loads of money. The fact is they don't. Our largest group makes between 40 and 50,000. Yes, that's a good income. Yes, everybody in this province should have a decent income. Everybody in this province should have decent benefits and a pension. The answer is not to cut those jobs that do pay people decently.
Yeah.
Dr. McKenzie was elected by the Transnational.
Leadership.
I don't need to tell you that the economy isn't working. It isn't working for most people. We have too many people, too many of you, I'm sure, too many of our family and our friends are in part-time, temporary, contract, precarious work. We have 250,000 children growing up in poverty. We have more than 150,000 families on waiting lists for public housing. 20,000 children in Toronto, is reported in the Toronto Star yesterday. 20,000 children are on waiting lists for child care spaces. We have 400,000...
Down with Trenton!
We have 400,000. We have 400,000 Ontarians visiting food banks every month. And what is Dalton McGuinty's solution to all of this? It's to slash spending on public services we need now more than ever in order to cut the deficit. And we say at OPSU, and I think probably all of you say, that's a bad idea. He is wrong. He is dead wrong.
Down with temporary services!
Now, as you know, last week, Joseph Stiglitz was here in Toronto. Do people know who Joseph Stiglitz? Yeah, so he's a Nobel Prize-winning economist. He's a former, I think, chief economist at the World Bank. And he's one of those people who's advocating a very different approach. And his approach is one that I think all of us could agree with. He said to a speech last week here in Toronto to a business audience, he said, austerity is a suicide path. He said that with the economy and the situation it is in, and with interest rates low, now is the time to address unmet social needs and put people back to work.
Yeah!
Because the problem, he says, the fundamental problem is people aren't spending out there. And it's a vicious cycle. Lack of demand leads to fewer jobs, right? Because companies aren't hiring people if nobody's buying anything. And that leads to even less demand. The problem is that after 30 years of business-friendly policies in this country, working people don't have enough money in their pockets. So here's what we say to Dalton McGuinty. Instead of giving money to corporations in the form of corporate tax cuts, let's put that money into the public services, the programs and services and infrastructure that we need. Because you probably know this already, I don't need to tell you it. The theory behind corporate tax cuts is that they encourage companies to invest. But the reality is in fact very different. Right now, corporate Canada is sitting on $477 billion in cash. $477 billion in cash. And that doesn't include the banks. That's excluding the banks. That's a huge amount of money. So our union says, let's stop giving tax cuts to companies that aren't investing, and instead, the provincial government should be investing our money into people, into public services and public infrastructure that we need. Because we can guarantee that 100% of that public investment is spent. It is spent in the local economy. It will create jobs. It will be a source of spending power for local businesses. It'll be people be working in government or non-profit agencies or building, for instance, affordable housing working for a private contractor. We need to keep the public sector strong and expand the number of decent paying jobs with dignity for people, not cutting jobs, which is what Dalton McGuinty is doing now. We need well-funded, universal, and accessible public services now. It's time that Dalton McGuinty heard that from all of us. Thank you.
Stop playing road hockey with the Constitution! Stop playing road hockey with the Constitution! And
Thank you, Sister Megan. Mic check.
Mic check!
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 All right, next up, I'd like to introduce a speaker from
A speaker from
the Canadian Peace Alliance.
the Canadian Peace Alliance.
We have Sid Lacombe
We're cyclical,
speaking about issues
about issues
of peace, war, and austerity.
about peace, war, and austerity.
Welcome, Brother Sid.
Welcome, Brother Sid.
Thank you very much, sisters and brothers, for coming out here today and for inviting us out here. The Canadian Peace Alliance is an organization of 150 anti-war groups across Canada. And we've been working on campaigns for the last... Am I too close to it?
No, it's okay, go.
We've been working on campaigns over the course of the last 25 years, not only to end war and foreign wars that Canadian soldiers are involved in, but to actually work on a campaign to make sure that we protect people's needs here in Canada rather than spending our money on wars abroad. The Canadian government right now, under Stephen Harper, is telling everyone in this country, people who are looking for affordable housing, people who are looking for money for education, people who are looking for money for health care, they are telling everyone that there is no money left, that Canada is broke. Don't listen to them, it's not actually true. The Harper government earmarked $500 billion for military spending under a thing called the Canada First Defence Strategy that was released a few years ago. $500 billion is what they're putting into the military. And we have discovered through the research we've been doing that that is in fact a very lowball figure. They have already earmarked just for new warships and new fighter jets more than $70 billion so far this year is going into this military equipment so that we can go and blow up the homes of people on the other side of the world rather than building them for people in this country. And it is a shame, and it's something that we all need to stand up against the Harper government over the course of the next number of months. Harper is calling for $11 billion in cuts to the public sector that are going to be coming down in the next federal budget. Those are not just cuts to the public sector in some vague sense. That is money that is used for healthcare. That is money that is used for education. That is money that could be used in the city of Toronto for transit. It's money that could be used for daycare spaces. And we're talking about to a total of $30 billion they are planning on spending each year for the military over and above what they have already decided to spend on the new capital procurement that they are doing under the Canada First Defence Strategy. That's why we have launched a campaign under the banner, and we've got postcards here today that we want people to take. Under the banner, peace and prosperity, not war and austerity.
We want to redirect that military spending to fund human needs here in Canada. It is absolutely obscene that they have spent already almost $30 billion on the war in Afghanistan. A war that is over in Afghanistan to support a government predominantly made up of corrupt, drug-running warlords, and that's what Canadian troops are doing there right now. They're supporting a government of the opium warlords, and they have spent $30 billion of your money on this particular campaign. Having problems with the mic. It is absolutely a shame. Just to give you some idea of what could be done with $30 billion, it would require $4 billion a year for the federal government to meet its requirements for the 1% solution to provide adequate housing for every single person in this country, a fraction of what they have spent on the war in Afghanistan. That $30 billion could eliminate all accumulated student debt in this country twice. It could actually eliminate it twice over. For $4 billion a year, you could provide free tuition to every single student in this country, so that education, which is a right, would be a right. But instead they're spending this money to blow up schools, to blow up hospitals, and to blow up homes on the other side of the world. Sisters and brothers, we have an opportunity to stand up against them. There's already thousands and thousands of these postcards that are circulating in various spots across the country, from coast to coast to coast. Our groups in Halifax, in Vancouver, and Yellowknife, and every point in between are launching this campaign and mobilizing people to say peace and prosperity, not war and austerity, money for human needs and not for the war machine. Thank you very much. Thank you, sir. Mic check! Mic check! Mic check! Mic check! Mic check! So quick announcement. With the performers, including the Samba Squad, please come to the backstage area to speak with us. And we have another very special speaker. So please help me in welcoming Gavin, who will be speaking about the sacred fire at Occupy Toronto. Gavin is the hereditary chief from Sikh Saka. Please help me introduce Brother Gavin.
Hello, it's actually Daveen, and I'm from the Siksika Nation. First of all, I want to acknowledge that we're on the Mississauga Nation New Credit land. 6 days ago, we lit a fire in the First Nations part of the Occupy Toronto, and it's been burning for 6 days. We're calling out for some support through everybody to come and learn. We have an elder there, and we have people keeping the fire. One thing I want to say is that I'm really against greed all in general. It doesn't necessarily have to be corporate greed. And I look at the way that my people are living in the conditions on the reserves and stuff like this, and I personally would like to see how the money being spent would be spent on social rehabilitation, mostly harm reduction, hopefully, economic. We don't want to see just casinos being the number one vice to let our people be economically beneficial in this world. And that's really sad that we have to learn to live on a vice to get rich. So the thing of it is that we're calling because we want people to come down and look at this fire. And we ask no drugs, no alcohol. This is one of the many traditional teachings that we have. And we ask that when you come with an open heart and an open mind. And that's all I have to say. So I please welcome to come down. Thank you very much.
Yeah, we need a teepee.
First of all, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional territories that we honored to stand on today. Let's not forget why we're here today. And it was the teachings and the elders that brought us to this point in history. My message today has changed for our people. I have a new message. And the message that comes from the sacred fire that still stands today, because we're following in our hearts and not our minds. And I have a message for you leaders today as well, that do not protect our women and our children. Do not disturb their laws and their traditional ways. They came here to disrupt the flow of our systems and of our waterways and our mountains. And our land and our skies are not honored our treaties. Let's not forget why we're here today. And it is against oppression and colonization. Today all these are asking for peace, unity, and solidarity. I want the world to know that I am a member of the Mohawk Warrior Society. And it is with an honor and gift and grace that I'm honored with their teachings. And that I can stand here today in solidarity with them and each other. I also get to carry the flag of Ed Harry Mahoney, who was also murdered because of the Olympics and her traditional territory. An elder that was died in new prisons because the health of government refuses to protect us or others. The message that I have for people today is this: you people are not ready. You people need our protection and our teaching. I want our clan mothers, I want our people to know today that we will not move here in our sacred territories. This is a dispute between us and the Queen. Because this is what brings us here today, of occupation, of stolen land, of deception, broken treaties. This is a message to your leaders, that we will call our women and our men and our clan mothers to protect us, because your ways are not protecting each other. We've had various incidents here in this camp because of your colonial ways. There's a lot of sadness that comes to that fire today. And we will protect our women and our children, as we said before. And we protect our teachers and our elders and our children. This is a message to your leaders, that they do not understand why we come here in solidarity and in peace. And I want them to know that we had a meeting this past week, and we will protect our women and our children that come to the teachers here. And we will ask the clan mothers now, as we all stand here in solidarity, to protect that sacred fire, and to send a strong message to the world that this government and other leaders will not protect Turtle Island. Thank you. Thank you all for coming out today. Thank you for educating the uneducated. Thank you for following our elders and our teachers. Thank you for respecting what's right. It is an honor that we can come together like this. It is an honor we could educate our oppressors, the ones that protect these cartels, the ones that serve these cartels. Let it be known we are not afraid of these cartels. Let it be known that we will protect our women and our children. Let it be known that we will search for our women and our children. Let it be known that it is now time for peace before Mother Earth disintegrates. Oh no.
Mic check. Mic check.
Mic check.
Mic check.
Mic check.
Mic check.
Mic check.
So I would like to apologize for not stating this message earlier. That we are here on the traditional territories of the Mississaugas of New Credit First Nations. And that most of us here today are settlers. And as settlers,
We have a responsibility to honor, respect, and protect this land. Thank you. I have one more announcement. So I have another announcement. If your name is Vadim and you lost your wallet, please come speak to Octavian. Please. And we have one more speaker. Before I introduce the Samba Squad, Soraya from Afghans for Peace. So please help me in welcoming the sister.
I am an activist against the Afghanistan war and a member of Afghans for Peace. I'm standing here in solidarity and support of Occupy Toronto, and I thank you all for being here today. I'd like to remind you all that Canada is still involved in the illegal war and occupation of my home country, Afghanistan. Despite the lie that we are told, we have not ended our combat mission because Canadian soldiers are still engaged in fighting. Billions of our taxpayers' dollars have gone into Afghanistan. We have to ask ourselves for what? For the further destruction of an already war-torn country? For the torture of civilians? For the slaughter of thousands of innocent human beings? We have to be aware of the facts, because it's not enough to just be informed. We have to accept it as the truth. As one woman's sign read, your ignorance is their power. But we also have to take action. Today we stand here together against injustice. Today, we stand here as proud Torontonians because tomorrow we can look back and say that we did not sit back and be silenced. It's time for us to fight back. Peace and prosperity, not war and austerity. Thank you.
Thank you, sister. Now, please help me in introducing the Samba Squad.